Because when people meet with resistance, they often feel like they're being attacked. And it's really often just a cry for help. And so if you can sort of mirror the language and label the emotion and not rush to judgment, and these are easier said than done. It takes practice like any other protocol. But if you do commit to to doing it and practicing it, the objections just melt away because people feel heard and cared for, and then they're open to allowing you to help demonstrate to them why they should trust you. And there's a fine balance between too much information too soon. And there's also a fine line on when to demonstrate enthusiasm. Because another client I worked with was pretty good at demonstrating caring, but they went, and the process is to really establishing a connection with someone is to establish rapport, convey empathy, and exude enthusiasm.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Danny Bobrow. Danny is creator of the Persuasion Blueprint. He has coached healthcare professionals and other business owners on effective communication since 1989. He is co-founder and CEO of the American Dental Corporation and founder of Climb for a Cause Foundation. He holds MBAs from the University of Chicago and KU Leuven, Belgium. He is a certified arbitrator and mediator, and a mountaineer and adventure racer. I love the banner on his LinkedIn profile. It's so awesome. Congrats on the Persuasion Blueprint and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Well, thank you, Carl. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you about something I think is really important these days with how much businesses are struggling to build trust and maintain trust in relationships is something you call the 3 C's of persuasive communication. So tell me more about that.
Sure. Well, those are basically the underpinnings of the Persuasion Blueprint, and they are shorthand for caring, connection, and collaboration. And, this is really consistent with the theme of your program, Carl, because this does recognize the fact that at the end of the day, clinical competency, technical expertise, whatever it is in your business that makes you good at what you do, it's necessary but not sufficient for success. We have to remember that we're dealing with human beings, and human beings are fragile and sensitive, whatever their station in life. And so we really need to remember, be cognizant of the importance of demonstrating caring, making the connection, and then moving on to collaborating or building the co-path together with your prospective, be it patient, client, current team member, spouse, teenage daughter, whoever it is you're trying to influence.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies and professionals misunderstand or just going to fail to understand what it takes to really be persuasive. They think the credentials or their technical expertise or a lot of like the hard skills make you persuasive, and they fail to understand that it's what you really persuades people is a lot more of the emotional connection and showing you understand your audience and where they're coming from. So, and I imagine that's what these 3 C's really help people get a grasp on, is how they can build those sort of connections. So what's some like a success story you've had from working with someone on these 3 C's of the Persuasion Blueprint?
Sure. Well, first I've had success on my own. I'm my own petri dish, and I try different techniques and make sure that they work. But you're absolutely right that persuasion is the key. And I think it's important to understand that people really make decisions on emotion, and then they justify it with logic. And so I've worked with a number of people who are really, sometimes your expertise gets in the way. I work with some very successful people, very competent people who I should clarify could be more successful and ought to be more successful given the level of expertise that they possess. And so, I've worked with a number of dental practices, people that want to lose weight, who want to encourage people to lose weight, fitness clubs, a number of different ones. I think most recent success I had was with a dental team that was one of the top providers of dental sleep apnea services in the country. And they were getting a lot of inquiries, and they were failing to successfully convert those inquiries into kept appointments and then happy patients that follow through on treatment. And so we identified that the people were really, when they were handling these inquiries, they were getting very quickly into the technical details, the credentials of the provider, and they failed to recognize the importance of sending caring signals, because a lot of people think that caring is self-evident, that if I care, then people are going to know it, and that's sadly for the human race not the case. There's a lot of I don't want to use a pejorative term, but there's a lot of ineptitude when it comes to communication. So we showed the team to slow down, on the importance of slowing down and asking questions, and really learning about why the person is calling, why they chose to call today, so that they could gain the insights into what is important to this caller, and also gives you an opportunity to identify why they might be resistant or reluctant to proceed with treatment. And I don't want to get too into the weeds, but the Persuasion Blueprint does go into identifying the different forms of resistance that you might meet with a prospective client, customer, patient, whoever, and then using the proper techniques to share your understanding of the person, that if they're resistant because of identity, this is a deep-seated feeling that if I proceed with this, or if I'm being asked to change a behavior, it's really impugning my identity, my self-worth. It really gets down to that level. And so it's very important to let people get comfortable with the fact that you're not suggesting that in any sense, that you're offering them a path to help them become even more effective and indispensable. And in no way are you attacking them or showing disrespect for who they are. So we had a lot of success with that. We got them to convert 12 cases in 4 weeks, which was a pretty big conversion rate for the big cases that they were presenting. And that's just one example that comes to mind immediately.
Yeah, I think it's a great example to show how the kind of rushing to close the deal or rushing to the technical details without addressing the emotional state of the caller, of the potential patient on the line, the person on the line, and identifying that the real obstacle wasn't anything to do with the product or the procedure or the technology. It was about the sense of identity, what saying yes to this opportunity would mean for how the person viewed themselves as a human being, as their personality or their view of themselves. They're basically like their ego in a lot of senses.
Exactly. The key is to let them know that you are that you have to not get defensive yourself, because when people meet with resistance, they often feel like they're being attacked, and it's really often just a cry for help. And so if you can sort of mirror the language and label the emotion and not rush to judgment, and these are easier said than done. It takes practice like any other protocol. But if you do commit to to doing it and practicing it, the objections just melt away, because people feel heard and cared for, and then they're open to allowing you to help demonstrate to them why they should trust you. And there's a fine balance between too much information too soon. And there's also a fine line on when to demonstrate enthusiasm. Because another client I worked with was pretty good at demonstrating caring, but they went, and the process is to really establishing a connection with someone is to establish rapport, convey empathy, and exude enthusiasm. But enthusiasm can be misapplied, or it can be applied at the wrong time, because people are resistant when they hear a salesperson or a person that's in the influencer role getting too excited ahead of the other person. Your enthusiasm needs to follow the enthusiasm of your counterpart, because otherwise it comes off as a sales tactic. It's like, well, what are you so excited about? I haven't, you're excited, but I'm not. So there's a disconnect there. So that's why this isn't just the science. It's perhaps even more so in art.
Yeah, and I think it's the overall approach of matching their energy and listening to, and not more than just what they're saying, but how they're saying it, their tone, their body language, facial expressions. Because if you're trying to build that rapport and get them to feel like you understand them and that you are alike, you're kind of like kind for each other, which is key for being persuasive and influential, is people to see themselves and you as in the same group, matching or mirroring their emotions, and at the same time they're feeling it helps reinforce that connection. And if you like I said, if you show the enthusiasm when they're still not sold on it, they're still thinking about it, and they're not feeling that, then it can break that connection really quickly and make them, put them on the back foot, and it can be a derailing to the conversation, because it's suddenly, again, because of what the current situation is with and people's perception of sales and salespeople. They're going to be assuming the worst if they kind of get that, if they're not sure why you're responding the way you are to how they're feeling.
Exactly. And it's a seemingly little thing. And that's the thing that I sort of learned, and have analogies in the adventure racing and mountaineering world. I've learned that the most successful racers are not necessarily the strongest. They're the ones that calibrate and pay close attention to themselves. Like a pebble in the shoe, if you ignore that at the beginning of a 100-mile foot race, you could be out in 7 miles. And it's the same thing in communication. That little slight lift of the eyebrow, or looking at your phone while you're supposed to be giving the prospect your undivided attention. Those little signals can compound and derail an otherwise successful presentation.
Yeah, there's it's fascinating. As you've been talking, I've been recognizing connections between what you've been saying and applying to the dental world, the healthcare world, the same sort of advice or similar advice to what I've heard from, even just, I think the last episode we recorded, guys were in a law firm, but his whole thing is about, like, when they took the first 10 minutes of a call to just listen to people and connect them and not rush right into the sales things. And if they couldn't end up helping the person, but still like giving that human connection, that attention, and just listening for 10 minutes and bonding, that drastically improved the growth of the company. And then even a couple episodes even before that, someone else was talking about how with employees, all these, it's not like one big betrayal that kills a relationship. All these little tiny, thousands of little tiny cuts of checking your phone during a meeting, or not like looking away, or like not giving people your full attention. All these little tiny slights that in the moment don't seem like much, but when they're habits, when it's a pattern of behavior, it's communicating to other people that you don't really care about them. And that over weeks and months just kills the relationship and leads to lack of trust and poor performance or low conversion rates. All these, the business outcomes that are not being achieved the way you want them to, or it's not because of one big drastic change that needs to be made. It's usually lots of tiny little habits that you or your team are
doing consistently.
Yeah. And you got to retrain those. And that takes a lot of work, because it's literally about reprogramming and rewiring your brain, the synapses and the connections to the way you behave on a daily basis, how you show up to every single call. And that's not easy or simple, like one click fix, but it's the reality of what has to happen if you want to really solve these problems. And these are things that aren't just for dental practice, aren't just for a law firm, aren't just for like a marketing company. This is when you're working with people and you're trying to persuade people and influence them and build these connections and get something from people, you have to first connect with them and show up in the way that you describe with these 3 C's and the persuasion blueprint is, I think, one of these things that is universal to human connection relationships throughout business and in personal relationships as well.
It absolutely is. It's another example of where one's expertise can get in the way, because when somebody has done something and they've really perfected their craft, when somebody asks a question, they often already know what the question is. And so there's a tendency I see, especially with high-powered professionals and impatient people, which often goes hand in hand, is that they brush past somebody's statement, or they finish their answer for them, their question. And they may even in their minds think, see, this shows how intuitive I am, that I really know what you're saying before you say it, right? But what it does is it deprives the person and you of demonstrating respect and caring, because that's what people need and want to be heard. And in fact, it's the case that you may actually learn something if you listen, because sometimes people will not say exactly what you think they're going to say. But in any case, you give them the respect of letting them finish what they have to say and avoid jumping all over them, because that's how they know. And then you confirm, say, well, the one example where eye contact sometimes is actually, eye contact is important. You talked about body language earlier, and certainly when you're in face-to-face communications, body language is really important. It's 55% of effective communication, according to Albert Moravian, who did a study on this subject. But the one exception to that is that if I'm talking to you and I'm taking copious notes, that's really, in my opinion, and I think it's been borne out, it's better than just staring at somebody. Because, and especially if you let them know, say, just, excuse me, I just want to make sure that I duplicate everything that you're sharing with me today completely. And then after you've done that, you say, would you mind if I repeat what you shared so that I know I've got it all complete and full? That is a great way to cement not only the caring signals, but it also gives then you an opportunity to hear from your prospect confirmation of the needs. Because now when you say these things that you go down the list, they say, yeah, that's exactly what I need. Or, yep, you got it right. Well, now you've got them in the habit of saying yes, and in truly agreeing and respecting that you are the one that's going to help guide them to a solution. So I think that's a really important factor too, where pacing, you mentioned listening. A lot of people are afraid of silence, and silence is your best friend in a sale or in a negotiation. So don't fear silence. In fact, you should embrace it. And one way to remember that is that I discovered not too long ago that listen and silent are actually anagrams. It's the same word, just spelled different. Rearrange the letter, get listen from silent.
I like that. I did not notice that, but that's a brilliant connection. And I think that, like, that your point about taking notes and then confirming that you got the notes down correctly is better at helping them understand that they've been listened to than just eye contact. But also, I think there's just, and if vocally, when you're confirming, just showing them that to someone, even if you're not taking notes, but just like repeating some of the words back or asking for clarification, and again, just verifying. So make sure you said X, Y, and Z, and that's a great way to just moving on to the next point is, okay, let me make sure I understand what you said, and just to reinforce, to then make it very clear that you are listening is a huge tip that makes a big difference. And I also think it's, while a lot of these AI like tools for Zoom meetings seem helpful, I think people lean on them too much as a crutch. As, oh, it's taking notes for me, I don't have to pay attention, I can just get the notes later. And well, yeah, that might be the case, but during the actual meeting in the moment, when you're on another screen or not paying attention, because you assume, oh, the note taker is going to get the information from me for me, you're still conveying to the other person with your actions this isn't as important. You're not as important to me as checking my Skype or Slack channel or other like windows and stuff. So it's the ability to actively listen and building the habits that demonstrate to the person that you're actually listening to them is a huge skill set that will, and a habit that helps people feel like you're actually listening, and helps them know that you're listening. So that makes you a lot more persuasive because they're feeling heard.
Right. And if I may, before we move on to the next topic, I think another area that we've helped people is often a salesperson will compartmentalize their delivery into steps where, you know, they get the foot in the door, then they have the discovery call, and then they provide the proposal. And I think they miss an important opportunity where if you view the meeting to just gather information, say, okay, great, I think I've got everything I need. I'll be sending you a proposal shortly, and then I'll follow up to confirm receipt and answer any questions that you have. You can do that, but I think you miss an important opportunity during that first initial session to confirm, as I just said, everything, and then begin to plan co-path together. You know, use this as an opportunity to say, well, you know, what do you see our work looking like? What do you expect to see in 1 year for you to have been glad that you decided to work with me? Or questions like, do you mind if we sort of map things out together now? Now you're engaging them and you're making the plan not just yours, but ours. And then when you submit the proposal, it's more or less a confirmation of what we've already agreed to. And so that's a really important stage, I think, in helping improve your closing ratios as well.
Well, I love that note. And on that note, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Danny. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please like, leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Danny, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.